Welcome back, everyone. Spring and summer is a time for new growth and taking bold action together. So we hope these stories will inspire you to live boldly, take wise chances, and with our friends and family make a difference together. Today we're going to be reading The American Story, 100 True Tales from American History by Jennifer Armstrong and illustrated by Roger Roth. So lean in with the spirit of adventure, grab a friend, and let's enjoy the story together. 1938, The War of the Worlds. People began tuning their radios to their favorite after-dinner programs on Sunday, October 30th. Some wanted to listen to music, some to comedy, shows to lighten the cares of the Great Depression, and others were in search of news. The airwaves had been filled with special bulletins all summer and fall as Germany took over Austria and invaded southern Czechoslovakia. European leaders had been pleading with Adolf Hitler to keep the peace, and the whole world was on edge. Some people turning into the Mercury Theater on the Air on CBS heard the announcement that tonight's radio play would be an adaptation of the science fiction novel The War of the Worlds. But not everyone heard that warning. So obviously, people are tuning in at different times, so clearly. Instead, people who turned in a bit after the broadcast had begun heard a weather report, then an orchestra at a Manhattan dance club playing a jazzy Latin number from south of the border. Then came on the air. Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. As listeners pricked up their ears, what had happened now? They learned that astronomers had observed mysterious explosions on the surface of Mars. A few minutes more of dance music came over the airwaves, only to be interrupted again with a live interview from an astronomy professor at Princeton University, discussing the explosions and the possibility or impossibility of life on Mars. Suddenly, in the midst of the interview, came the startling news that a huge flaming object had landed on a farm in Grover's Mills, New Jersey. A special mobile unit was on its way to report. Up and down the eastern seaboard, more and more people were scooting their chairs closer to their radios, trying to quell their rising uneasiness. Because remember, people at this time, there were, not everything was the news, but people were tuning in to hear about the war, the actual war. So it's even worse, trying to figure out if relatives had passed away. So people were tuning into this expecting war. From the scene, reporter Carl Phillips described what he was seeing. I wish I could convey the atmosphere, the background of this fantastic scene. Hundreds of cars are parked in a field in back of us. Police are trying to rope off and remember, it's radio, so we can't see this. Rope off the roadway, but it's no use. Their headlights throw an enormous spot on the pit where the object's half buried. Some of the more daring souls are venturing near the edge. Listen, do you hear it? It's a curious humming sound that seems to come from inside the object. Then from the background, excited voices could be heard crying, "Look, the darn thing's unscrewing! Get back! It's red hot! They'll burn to a cinder! Keep those idiots back!" Within moments, the broadcast had denigrated into explosions and screams of agony. Sheer terror and panic had now taken hold at the scene. The radio audience, hearts pounding, listened helplessly to the sounds of chaos and devastation coming to them from over the airwaves from New Jersey. An invading Martian force had begun a destructive rampage. And that was when the panic really hit. Listeners began dashing to their telephones, calling the police, calling friends and distant family, calling the National Guard, calling the newspapers. Distraught mothers began to pack suitcases, and fathers loaded valuables into the cars. They had to get out, get away from the merciless and unstoppable Martians. Up and down the East Coast, there were traffic jams, prayers for deliverance, and noble offers to help fight the invaders. Before long, looting began, along with hysterical struggles over food and gasoline. There was pandemonium from Maine to Florida, and it was spreading westward. The people who tried to flee. Now, some reports say it wasn't as, the response wasn't as over the top as we understand it to be. Because, people do have a habit of looking at the past and making them seem sillier and more naive than we are today. But I have to say, in 1957, the BBC, so remember, people went to the BBC for, facts, for news, government controlled, our government wouldn't lie to us stuff. And they reported that Italy and Switzerland had a spaghetti tree that they were harvesting. And so they call it the spaghetti tree hoax. And it's pretty famous. But, and the first war correspondent the BBC ever had did the report. So it gave extra credence that this was true. And it caused pandemonium. And that was 1957. Now, not the same pandemonium, like we're going to die, but, people thought it was real and people called in and it was this whole thing. So this is why I don't like April Fools. I just, and I think the concept of it is sinister. I know not everybody treats it that way, but I just wonder why it was created, and, that we have a whole culture of tricking people on a certain day. I don't know. I don't like it. It's a whole thing, but because sometimes this happens. But anyway, I digress. All right. The people who tried to flee had been too shaken up to recognize the distinctive voice of Orson Welles, the star of Mercury Theater, who was speaking the role of the Princeton astronomer. In the radio studio where the play was underway, the actors had no idea that what their drama had provoked. They continued with live reports and interviews with Army commanders, federal officials, and eyewitnesses, all describing the terrible advance of the Martians with their poison gas and death rays, their horrific giant machines standing across the Hudson River and into Manhattan itself. At 9 o'clock, Welles concluded the program by saying, "This is Orson Welles, ladies and gentlemen, out of character to assure you that the War of the Worlds has no future significance than as the holiday offering it was intended to be. The Mercury Theater's own version of dressing up in sheets and saying boo. So goodbye, everyone. That was no Martian. It's Halloween." The door of the broadcast studio burst open, and the place was suddenly filled with police and angry officials wanting to arrest everybody in sight for causing the largest, most widespread panic of the century. And the note here says, Welles and the other actors were not prosecuted. No one wanted to come across as repressive tyrants at a time when all eyes were on the absolutist regimes in Germany, Japan, and the Soviet Union. Fortunately, nobody died in the panic. If that had happened, Orson Welles might not have gotten off so easily, and perhaps he wouldn't have been able to go on to Hollywood and create Citizen Kane.